Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today from your busy schedules to learn about angel investments in the Canadian landscape. My name is Dr. Drew, and I'm humbled to host this episode of the Financial and Investor Literacy episodic series that I called Files. I have the pleasure here of introducing Luke, who I met in 2020 when I was moving from one community to the other, and I had my own fair share of entrepreneurial solopreneur troubles, and so I wanted to find my network, and Luke was gracious enough to connect with me over phone around that time, and I learned a lot. I still continue to learn a lot. Luke is the founding executive director of Halohealth, which is Canada's first physician angel group. In his previous career, he was part of a startup exit and was a senior consultant at a global strategy management consulting firm with client coverage in various industry verticals. Currently, Luke leads Halohealth full-time, provides mentorship to Halohealth fellows and advisory to various healthcare startups. To give back to the community, Luke serves as an appointed member at Plug and Play Tech Center Health, mentor at University of Toronto Health Innovation Hub, and an expert advisor at the University of Calgary, Innovate Calgary. Since launching in January of 2020, Halohealth has invested in 40 healthcare startups and have had 4 exits. Our mission, or my mission, or PPI's mission, is to foster physician financial literacy, because as stronger physicians, we can provide better patient care. And on that note, I will transfer it to Luke.
Thanks, Drew. Really grateful to be here and happy to try to add value as much as I can. I think, Drew, you and I interfaced through Halohealth, which of course we started for the exact sole reason of trying to include physicians and help them become sophisticated angel investor and advisors. And because of that reason, we only invest in healthcare startups. So to give you a quick primer and maybe more about angel investment as a whole, but more into the healthcare vertical, I'll just do some definitions and we can keep this a free-flowing dialogue. So angel investment tends to be a higher risk asset class, but with higher risk comes higher reward. So what does that really mean? Well, if we look at it from one end to another, we have very early stage stuff, which is angel type investment. And then you have mature assets in the capital market of which you can access publicly by buying stocks or other forms of mature assets where the company or the target company has been running for a very long time. Angel investment is the startups where it is not an established company yet. It is very early. There are also subsectors and division in how early it is, but for now, it basically means that you are a private investor. And because you're an accredited investor, it allows you to have access to these assets and you're investing in exchange for equity quite often. So you're taking part in the early start of the startup's life, and you as an investor is fueling their growth through your capital, and quite often with angel type investing, advisory. So within that, there's some intricacies and there's obviously a lot to go through. So Drew, I'll have you to call out which points that you really want to dig into before we jump into anything granular. If you have any other direction or call outs you want to make before we go into some of the overview of healthcare startup verticals, happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thanks a lot for covering, the definition or the spectrum of business investment, everything from startups, which is close to the angel investments, all the way up to, buying a public stock like Apple or Google or NVIDIA, and then getting the dividends that way. Now, could you comment on a few sectors which within the angel investment world, for example, a lot of physicians would be aware of real estate. So they know single family, they know multifamily, they know office, dental clinics, that kind of stuff. So what are some sectors in the angel investment?
Sure.
And also, what is this concept of seed series that people talk about?
Sure.
Seed funding.
Sure.
What is angel funding, seed funding? Could differentiate that.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So within angel investing, and mind you, this is encompassing all the early stage companies, There are various different types of focus, i.e. what the company is doing in terms of building their products and what kind of solution that they're offering. And some that come to mind that's been in the news and is popular is, we all know, fintech, huge industry, a lot of startups coming up in that industry as well. As of late in the Canadian ecosystem, because of the fact that we do have a great prairie exposure, there are new emerging startups that are focusing on, for example, ag tech or agriculture-based technologies. Another sub-vertical that's emerging that is somewhat relevant to healthcare in the US that we've seen on other panels I've been with is age tech. So for the aging population. So as you can see, if there is a problem in the world and there is an economy based around it, there is going to be angel investment opportunities where the startup founders are trying to fix that type of problem. So it can range in multitude of aspects of your life and products you use. It's not just focused to one sub-vertical, I would say. What is important to note, however, is even within those broad buckets, such as financial tech, fintech, ag tech, age tech, there are sub-verticals within it that might appeal to you as an investor. So to answer your second part of the question, what is this friends and family around angel, seed, series A, and all of that? So usually on the spectrum of a startup's financial growth, when they are raising, they start out with friends and family. So that's when they have a vision, the founders are dedicated, they might have even put some of their own capital in, and they go out and ask their best friends and their family for financial funding in piece and a chunk for the equity in the company usually. And that point, they will have to come up with milestones. How are they going to grow the company? Why are they going to raise subsequently? And what kind of milestones do they have to achieve in order to raise another round? Because as a company grows, especially during the early years of the startup, you're going to need a lot of financial backing in order to build products, hire more people, etc. So after friends and family, that is when angels come in. So that could mean anywhere from pre-seed all the way to pre-series A. And within that bucket, it's usually broken down. The lingo is pre-seed, seed, and then maybe seed extension. So at Halohealth, which all of our members are physician angel investors, we tend to focus within that bracket. That's where we set the rail guards around what kind of deals we look at. And the reason why we do that is because angel investing is early. Therefore, the check sizes are much smaller. So as an angel investor in Canada in healthcare, within this range of investment possibility and stage, you can access a startup investment as low as 25K. And I mentioned that as an angel, you have access to these types of opportunities because quite often angels are accredited investors. It's defined by the Canadian Security Commission. It is pretty much the same across most provinces. Usually attending staff positions meet that requirement. As of late, it's 200K in annual income for at least the last 2 years, or all total assets exceeding 5 mil. But it does change from time to time, but that's usually the regulatory guidelines. But that being said, after that period for angel investing comes seed extension sometimes, especially now with, we're in 2023, the market is working somewhat inefficiently, as people might say. Valuations are down, economy is suffering. So a lot of startups are doing extension rounds to support their growth and keep their lights on. Now, after that point is Series A. And those go from Series A, B, C, D, E, on all the way till, the alphabet runs out.
Yeah.
But basically, what that denotes is that is still a period of the startup's growth where they're getting capital from private investors. It is not a publicly listed company. Thereby, in Canadian landscape, the major institutional investors, such as venture capital firms, they tend to go later stage, such as Series A and beyond. Now, I'm not saying that in the US there are dedicated VC firms that will come in at seed or even pre-seed, And even at Halohealth, there's quite often readily opportunities where we invest in the same company that VCs will, because they go in early. However, the differentiating factor here is that it's the buying power. When the startups get to Series A, their valuation tends to be much larger, which denotes that the company is growing, and that's what you want to see. You never want to see a down round. And because their valuation is bigger, the minimum check size eligible to invest will be much larger. So when we get to Series A in Canada, we're looking at sizes of checks anywhere from 500K to up to 2 million in the healthcare vertical. Now, one thing to take away here is that that number will drastically differ between fintech or any other startup. Mm-hmm. We're just discussing this within the window of healthcare startups. So Series A, B, C, D, E, F, larger institutional investors, much more money in, companies growing. At this point, they're probably also generating revenue, which helps to create their valuation. And then they'll do that. They'll do that until the board, the founders, and the major shareholders see any other opportunities. And other opportunities after, let's say, a Series F, and these are companies that some of you might even know, they look for an exit, a liquidity event. That is when you, as an investor, get your money back. And that could happen a couple ways. It could be through an acquisition. So a bigger parent company or a bigger publicly traded company will come out and just buy the company out so that they can own it. The other option is if you're already by Series F or G and these companies are generating millions of dollars of revenue, is going the IPO route, initial public offering, i.e. listing the company on the public capital markets as a traded company. So that's when the company gets big enough that, and the shareholders and the board members make a decision that they're ready, and then they trade publicly. So that occurs after all the series, and thereby at the end of the series raise, you go IPO. That's when you don't raise from private investors, but from the public markets. So you don't have to necessarily be an accredited investor. It's like buying Tesla stocks. They went public, that's what it means to go public. So again, that's the differentiating factor between private and public. And those are the stages all the way from friends and family, pre-seed, seed, seed extension, Series A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then either acquisition or IPO.
Okay, perfect. I mean, I think that gives a pretty clear explanation of where, even Halohealth's boundaries are, right? So pre-seed to seed extension. Now, is Halohealth sector agnostic, or do we focus on healthcare?
Yeah, so for us, because we are the only physician-exclusive angel group, we tend to invest in what we know. And because of that fact, we only invest in healthcare ventures. So even within that, so we're not sector agnostic, we're healthcare startups only. Even within that, I'll just share something really briefly here. Mm-hmm. There are what's called subverticals. And I'm happy to explore that a little bit more and give you the different dynamics of what that actually entails.
Could you define what? Yeah, could you define what a subvertical is? Because you've used that phrase.
Sure.
Subvertical a few times.
Sure. Yeah. So I would say vertical is like in medical specialty, you have your specialization, and then you have your subspecialty training.
Yes.
So think of it as a bigger funnel, and then you get really specific on the parameters and the types of stuff that you are good at and what you look at. So within healthcare, it's widely defined as technologies that benefit the health of the population. But for us, because we are operating under the lens of physician angels, we like to take that a step further. And we like to look at assets and startups that are clinically relevant. Because for us, it comes down to doctors know the inefficiency of the healthcare system. They know that when they see it, that it has the potential to help a patient, their practice, and their staff. So that's what we mean first by clinical. Is it going to be used in the hospital? Is it going to be used by the doctors? So that's our first litmus test, which is a bit different because that's our thesis. That's what we look at. So if that's met, we categorize the healthcare startups into a couple buckets, i.e. subvertical. One of them is digital health. I think one great example that comes to mind and what Halohealth members invested early before the pandemic was telemedicine. As physicians, that idea perhaps of being able to provide your services to a patient at home through your phone may not seem so foreign. But at the time, people who are not practicing thought that was strange and that was odd. But those are exactly the things we like. And that's the beauty of Halohealth and why I like to empower physicians. I think a lot of physicians, for the right reason, believe anything financial, it's not their thing. But we have people like you who's a testament that as long as you do have the scientific and medical knowledge, you bring more to the table than you think. You know a lot about clinical workflow. You know a lot about the intricacies of the subspecialization that you practice. So that's a great example, digital health. It's a startup that is building a digital product, telemedicine, allows you to see your doctor on your phone, but it still benefits the health of the general population. It is also clinically relevant because our folks can directly use it, and it can also sometimes optimize how our doctors provide their care. Remote areas where it might be impossible to drive up, time is of the essence, of course. There's a lot of application of telemedicine. So because of that reason, one of the earlier investments Halo did, and actually one of the earliest exits that we had, it was actually a company that our folks invested in called Inkblot. It's a telemedicine psychiatric platform, wildly successful, a lot of lives saved, broke down the barrier of getting mental help and seeing a psychiatrist through your phone. So that's digital health. That's one of the subverticals. Other ones include medical device. So we all know the different types of medical device, and for especially our surgical MD colleagues, there's even subverticals among that. There's devices that's outside of the body. There's implantable devices. So again, there could be stratification and specification even within that vertical. Another big bucket is pharmaceutical and therapeutics. We all know what that is. So I'll skip over what that entails. And then the other one that is emerging is diagnostic. Now, I made this chart and broke it down into these subverticals, and I put some of the variables on the y-axis at how we like to take a look at these various healthcare startups. At Halohealth, we get over 200 healthcare startups coming to us through application, through other VC firms, through intros, through academic institutions, research centers, et cetera. Rate of maturity is something that an angel investor should recognize and understand. It is something that is your thesis, that is your appetite. And what we mean by that is how fast the startup has the potential to grow. Now, because we don't have a crystal ball or else we'll be all billionaires, we don't know how fast the startup is going to grow. So I'm just talking based on a sample size of what we invested in, what we've seen, and as well as amalgamating that with the inputs of other healthcare VC investors that are close friends of mine. And, for rate of maturity, digital health tends to be faster. So that's why I'm cautious that it can be fast. Why? Because you're not building a hard good, you're building a software product. And quite often with that, you'll see that on the third row, the regulatory hurdle is low. So let's jump over to the device. We know that if it's an implantable device, of course, there's going to be clinical trials, there's FDA, there's Health Canada, a lot of red tape. But depending on the application of the digital health product, quite often there is no regulatory to even go through. So that's why the growth of the product and the company can be fast comparatively. And because of that, I also want to make sure that folks understand this. When you're looking at a startup, again, it ties into your thesis and your risk appetite, you should see what materially affects the growth of the company and the valuation of the company. So digital health companies, quite often, their metrics are tied to, for example, B2B SaaS companies, almost like fintech company, business to business service Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say if you could expand on B2B because some people may not know, but yeah, you
Right.
business
Yeah.
to business,
So
business to client or customer.
exactly. So there's multiple buckets. There's way many more lingo out there, but
Yeah.
B2B usually denotes business to business, which means that the company is selling to a large enterprise or accomplished business. B2C, which is business to customer, means direct selling. But there's a reason why in the industry, especially fintech, people like B2B SaaS, software as a service, because it's the customer acquisition cost, or CAC, is lower because you're selling to the enterprise that has its own list of clients or even their internal staff. But before getting to sidetrack too much, digital health tends to use those metrics because the product is more similar to a software product, because it literally is a software product quite often. Another example is these efficiency softwares that we're seeing that helps clinicians reduce admin burden. So we're seeing cool things that integrate to your EHR, EMR, where it will cut down your time on dictation because it'll do it automatically for you. Or, it will collect all patient information and aggregate it and then put it into EHR. So those are some examples of digital health software-based products. So moving on to device, as I mentioned, it tends to be slower. And as you can imagine, implantable device is probably slower than a medical device that is gauged for outside of the body for a multitude of reasons. There's more regulatory hurdle to go through. So with these companies, the advancement of their valuation tends to heavily depend on their regulatory rather than other metrics such as active users. And the reason why that is because you need to get through the regulatory first in order for you to sell it to the customers. And because of that journey, their advancement and their valuation tends to be more far stretched. So in average, the returns that you're going to get tends to take longer, i.e. your hold, how much money that is tied into that company tends to be longer. And that jumps into pharmaceutical and therapeutics. I think, a lot of practicing physicians, they're all familiar with the drugs they prescribe. And I think they're all familiar why drug reps and pharmaceutical companies are so competitive about introducing new drugs to the market, because we know that generic drugs come into play after 10 years in the market and the price drops steeply. Some market insight here and why angel investing can be a fit. A lot of large pharmaceutical conglomerates, such as J&J, Pfizer, you name it, instead of developing new drug portfolios in-house, they actually tend to take a venture capital approach where they will bet on similar ponies that are developing a drug for same indication of usage that are still in the startup phase. And then as they get their regulatory approvals, they will acquire that company outright so that they have the ownership to that new drug. Because of that approach, rather than an in-house R&D, because it costs less to do so, investors and private investors and even angel investors have a chance to participate in the very early dawn age of a pharmaceutical startup. Out of the 40 companies we invested in, our folks have invested in some pharmaceutical and therapeutic assets. But one thing I will say is that, like device, the rate of maturity can be slow for obvious reasons. Clinical trial, right? You got to get approval. You got to get FDA approval. But it's one of those assets that is also quite binary. If you're especially going in very early when it's transitioning from a lab or lab to commercialization stage, it can be very binary in that your investment will either work, i.e. the drug will either go to market, or the drug will not go to market, or it will not be acquired. So it can be a long, treacherous road, but the upside can be big. I will, however, point this out in device and pharmaceutical therapeutics. Compared to digital health, they require a lot of dry powder to get to commercialization stage. And that's why they tend to raise much larger amounts, and their valuation after, let's say they get stage 1 clinical trial done and approved, tends to skyrocket. And for angel investors, depending on where you get in, it might not be advantageous because you might get diluted later on. When you wrote your first 25K check, here we were 5 years later, the company is doing great. Their valuation is hopefully 10, 50x what it used to be. But to keep your percentage of ownership of the company, you might need to top up a bit more, right? But that topping off might be, we're talking tens or if not even hundreds of millions of dollars to keep your equity percentage, your percentage ownership. So that's why we at Halohealth, we're very careful to screen for the startups that will set our angel investors for success. So we're not out there competing with large firms dumping millions of dollars and our folks are at a 25K check because it wouldn't be fair. They're getting a very small equity. However, one thing to notice is because their maturity rate is slow and long, you have to be cognizant of when am I going to get my money back? How much money do they really need to raise to commercialize? And quite often it can be significantly higher than digital health assets. Now, the last bucket. Oh, go ahead, Drew. If you have any
Go ahead.
questions.
No,
Yeah.
I'll summarize.
Great. And you know, the last bucket I would say is diagnostics. We're seeing a lot of these days. So market insights internally at Halohealth, we're very lucky that we get so much deal flow. And because of that reason, we see 2 or 3 startups in a month that are solving the same problem for same indicated use, but they don't know each other.
Yeah.
But it gives us market intelligence. We know exactly who the leaders and laggers are, and we can benchmark them internally, which is an important tool to have as an angel investor. You need to know where the market is going. As physicians, everybody knows what diagnostic tools are, and they probably know also why it's very sensitive. You really can't be wrong about diagnostic outcomes. And we already have sophisticated technology that is very cheap. You know, you can call for a lab and do a CBC, very accurate, very cheap, very fast, and we know that it works. And also it plugs into a very established clinical workflow and diagnosis. Now, with the new startups, that's the danger, which is they are developing new technologies that can diagnose things that our current technology may not be able to, or it might be even more sensitive and more accurate. However, to get there, like device and pharma, you need to do a lot of clinical trials. And you better be, you know, absolutely sure, because this is life or death, right? Diagnostic devices are very sensitive. However, you know, there's really out there stuff that are saying you can do early cancer detection by a patient's breath. It's a pretty big vision, and we've seen a couple of those. And if they can make that happen, obviously as an investor, that is going to be a world-changing investment. But the treacherous road to get there will be pretty stringent. And the regulatory hurdle, I would say, perhaps even the highest, with serious indication of use such as cancer. So because of that reason, you know, it's a long road, but can be rewarding. And there are also a lot of regulatory hurdles that are associated with that. And then, you know, one thing I will say as investors, you should also consider is, and I think physicians have a very, very good, keen sense of this, which will help them in their angel investing journey if they do healthcare investment, is if this vision was to be executed tomorrow, and we had this neat machine, drug, whatever in your hand, does this integrate to our clinical workflow? Will our staff use it? Does it actually convert into a clinical decision? If that's a yes, then you know that's one more point for the startup that you're looking at. But I think quite often that ability that any physician can do as long as they understand the product is humongous. It's something that not all VC firms can figure out. And that's why physician angel investors have so much power, and that's why they're coveted. So that's a quick overview of the different sub-verticals with a little bit of tangents. But happy to you know, throw it back to you, Drew, for maybe a summary and other questions.
This is excellent, right? I mean, when I started this journey, I had very little idea of any of the concepts that you're talking about. So in summary, you know, we talked about the healthcare vertical, we talked about the sub verticals within healthcare. In this case, Halohealth's investment thesis involves digital health, device, pharmaceuticals, and diagnostics. We talked about the valuations, the prevention of dilution of our funds when we get equity in the company because we're coming in with smaller size checks compared to when they go on to higher series or when they go on to venture capital. You also talked about how physicians can add value into the system by actually doing, which is what our next section is, which is due diligence on the company, which is one should, ideally you should do due diligence in any investment that they do, whether it fits their investment thesis, whether this is something that you can understand what the risks are, yes, for the rewards as well. But because we are physicians and have the clinical knowledge, we're able to at least do some of the due diligence, which we will transition to in the next topic, which is what is due diligence of an angel investment. Now, the one, I guess the phrase that was also used by yourself is dry powder. Could you comment on what that is?
Yeah, dry powder can mean multiple things, but basically denotes a lot of capital floating around. Capital can be allocated elsewhere. So right now, the apt term that is commonly thrown out by VC is that even though the market is down, there's a lot of dry powder because investors are not placing their money. So it's unallocated cash in simple terms. But there's some nuances to that term, and it could be used in a multitude of ways.
Yeah. And an important point to mention here is that these are illiquid investments until there is a liquidity event. Now, is there a reason why Halohealth sticks to these subverticals because there are higher returns in this section, or they're time tested, or is Halohealth a spectrum in the investing world between impact investing because we have a mission to improve patient healthcare and physician quality of life, or is it no, we're just looking at returns like venture capital?
Yeah, so I think with any investor, institutional, private, or otherwise, your thesis is important. And I think what we landed in is that because Halohealth was founded by physicians for physicians, was physicians know what is lacking and what could improve healthcare, but they don't have the time to go build it. Why? Because they're trained to do what they do best, which is actually practice medicine. And we all know doctors are busy.
Yeah.
So then here's the age-old thought. Why? And Elon Musk is always quoted too much, so I don't like to use that example, but why did SpaceX develop so much faster than NASA? Why did Tesla go to market first with electric vehicles compared to other automotive giants? It's because the main folks, and in this example, physicians are actually delivering healthcare, which does not leave a lot of time for them to develop these or augment or fix these deficiencies. So then we need startup founders who may have different training in engineering, finance, design building to help solve these problems. So that was our thesis. Physicians need startup founders who's going to help improve healthcare, but also startup founders who are passionate need physicians for advisory and input on what they actually need and how healthcare is exactly delivered for the product's indication of use. So when we put that together, we thought that gives physicians a very vital and unique need in the ecosystem to become angel investors and be successful at it because of all the variables I mentioned. But then really tying that to due diligence and our thesis and impact, the way we see it is, and I'll try to draw in from the next step, is, are they really solving a problem? That's a big thing for us. So we're not as prescriptive and quantitative as, we're going to do all this financial modeling, we're going to do all this quantitative reasoning. Well, you can in the early stage anyway, because you don't have the company's historicals. They're not generating revenue anyway. So it's not like private equity or later stage assets where you can do a DCF, for example, a discounted cash flow, because there are no financials. And that's why angel investing is extremely different than later stage investing. So then drawing our due diligence and our thesis together, first thing we look at is there an actual problem that the startup is claiming to be? And physicians know that first. Subspecialists know how many cases of XYZ they see per year, per month, per day. They know how big of an affected population that might be. So what we try to do in a very big brushstroke is the startup solving a problem that really exists? Is the population that is affected who's going to benefit from this big enough? And can they actually get this to be a company in which they generate revenue from it? So it's not a simple trick to say, you know, is this a desirable product that's going to sell? No, we look at it holistically where, you know, if it makes sense that it'll actually save people, the problem does exist, it integrates into clinical workflow, and they figured out how they're going to get paid for it. Because mind you, there's life-saving technologies in the lab right now, but there's no way to get paid for it. So then that's a lab experiment, exactly. Lab experiment, not a company. A company must monetize, they must generate revenue, right? So then we look at such thing as buyer-payer relationship. Did they figure out how to get this reimbursed? Who's going to pay for it? Did they know that the target audience is going to actually buy it? So that all of those factors actually fit into our due diligence. And, you know, I think I mentioned it right now. So, you know, the way that we look at it, you know, does a problem exist? How big of a problem really is it? And the common term that startup founders and their decks use after they give some testimonial market research that they did the research that the problem exists, which is number one. That's really key. Because quite often some startups even come in and they seem like, unfortunately, a hammer looking for a nail. When we ask the hard question, did you really interview the key opinion leaders? Did you really interview the patients? Did you really dig in to see if this problem is something that exists in our natural world or something that you manufactured to fit your product? It should be the other way around. And then also we look at how much of a big problem is it, right? If you are developing a drug that only affects, you know, 0.00001 of the population, I commend your efforts and I hope it goes well. But, you know, there's another company that has the same variables that is targeting 50% of the population. So we need to understand how much of a problem it really is. Second, and I framed these variables to be friendly to doctors because they can answer most of these questions, even their first-time investors. Second is product market fit. I think this is where physicians can really, really shine. Once they get to understand a new product, a new drug, how it works, they can give you a pretty fast answer whether or not this is applicable in the current clinical arena. Will people use it? Is there resistance? Is there going to be change management issues? So this is something that a lot of physicians know and we depend on them. So for example, we have 380 physicians in our member network. They represent 40 different subspecialty and subspecialty training. So when we ask them, we explain it, the startup founders pitch, they can give you a very accurate answer pretty quickly on the product market fit. Super important. Third, market saturation. You know, there's a saying that if you're building something that is having the same effect, using the same principles or solving the same problem, and it's already out in the market, you better be very careful that your product is exponentially better or exponentially cheaper. There's got to be that component that will give them an upper edge in terms of cost benefit. So we look at that. We look at market saturation. We look at companies that tend to have less competition. The more novel the idea is, the less competitors they should have. So that is an important due diligence element that we do take into consideration. And then, of course, scalability. This ties into the market size as well. There could be a very easy to sell product that is cheap than what's out there, that is going to solve the problem. Product market fit is great, but we only know that for some awkward reason, it can only regulatory-wise be sold in Ontario. And there's no other ways to go around that. So then scalability, is it going to be a global leader? Is it going to be regional, municipal? Is it only going to be city? So we need to look at scalability as well. Like, is this a global relatable problem that can be adapted to multiple markets with different regulatory patterns and still succeed because it is such a relatable problem. So that's some of the stuff that we look at in terms of due diligence and some of the questions that our physician members can answer efficiently. And quite often, these things at the beginning stage matter more than some of the financial analysis that people think they need to do for angel investing.
Yeah.
Quite often, there's not enough financial statements to even do
T12s.
it.
There's no T12. Like
there's nothing, there's no historicals, there's no revenue quite often with pre-seed and seed companies. So I would say, this is something that doctors can really shine and really can get used to answering from day one.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for giving a primer into due diligence. I mean, that's, I think, what separates, I think personally for me, when I went through this journey of looking at the different asset classes was, due diligence is what separates an angel investment compared to, all the other investments that one could do. And it's important to both have a macro picture as well as, a micro picture and the business model. Now, among the, due diligence elements that you've listed here, what about founder due diligence?
Yeah, so the thing about assets that are listed in the public market that are trading in TSX, Nasdaq, all of that, those governing bodies do the due diligence on behalf of the investor before it's listed. And that's why we know that Tesla is listed and not delisted, because they're up to date on all regulatory or compliance matters. Mm-hmm. And that's why due diligence is important with angels, because there's no governing body that's going to do that for you. It's your job to do it. Now, you bring up a good point on the founder due diligence. That is, in fact, a huge part of our scoring metric, especially this early in investment. Why? Because you are somewhat investing in the vision and the trust in the founders and the fact that they can execute it. You're betting on the founder. That's your guy or gal. That's your person. So there's a couple ways to do it. Some VC firms, if they have the money, they'll even hire law firms and do even a security check or a background check. As angel investors, sure, if you're a super angel and you think that is the most important variable, go crazy, go nuts. You can even try to get if they're up to date with their CRA taxes. But quite often for us, that's why we value meeting the founders in person and also investing a significant time in due diligence to get to know the founders. There's a metric out there, I think it's on Y Combinator's free blog, where there's an exponential difference when charted of time spent on due diligence versus return. I.e., simple terms, spend more time doing due diligence, asking questions, getting to know the founder, asking the hard questions, trying to poke holes in in how they do their business. That equates to a better return because you're being more thorough. Because at any point of this engagement, some red flags might show up. And you would have never found that if you didn't take the time and invested your time to do the due diligence. So I think, there's different ways to do it, but, we live in a crafty age where Google and LinkedIn will find any dirt, and anything that is discrepant from the deck or mayhaps not by the founder's intent, but overplayed, that's something that's fair to call out. And it's fairly easy to find. And, I think some of the subtle things that a lot of veteran VCs look at is how the founders interact with you as an investor. It could be simple as just being respectful, but also well-spoken. Are they answering things honestly? Are they not leading you on? Are they not portraying data that is overinflated? Do they have integrity? Do they have honesty, right? That's something that definitely comes out through the multitude of interaction. And that, I think, is super important. One metric, I think everybody knows this, coachability.
Yeah.
That also comes out during due diligence of the founders. Are they going to listen to you? Because you're a doctor, you're going to have a lot of value to add. But if they're not open to new ideas and not open to getting coaching from veteran VCs who might have co-invested with you, then we have a problem. So that's something we'll look at. Also, team. Quite often, we like to look at whether or not the founding team is well-rounded to execute the vision at hand. Do we have a team where they all do the same thing and they're all trained the same way? Probably not the best allocation of resource, especially in the early days. You can't put new staff on payroll. You don't have the money. These are the founders. They're going to work for the equity. So quite often we like to see how diversified and well-rounded the team is. And what I mean by that is the CEO, can he sell the vision? Does he have the training? Does he have the experience? Maybe we need a scientific person who's developing the actual IP and the product. Do we have a marketing and finance person who can craft all these difficult financial statements in the future? Maybe an accountant, maybe someone with a CPA background. So if we have all of that, it's well-rounded, and that is something that we acutely do look into, whether or not the startup is bringing that in. You know, another thing is, can they get to a certain stage where it can build it in-house? I.e., can the team execute till maybe perhaps even Series A without outsourcing? So, you know, when we look at software digital products, they show up with a vision, which is great. But when we dig into it, we find out that they hired a third-party firm overseas to build the product. So then if you don't have anyone who how your product frankly works, then that's not very trustworthy, is it? Where you're saying this is a product we built, well, who built it? So those kind of things can come up in due diligence and how it relates to the team.
And you know, I mean, we're just touching the surface of due diligence. I mean, that's the thing is I truly agree that the amount of time that you spend in the due diligence is related to the returns you get, which is the reason why, you know, when I was building my investment thesis, when I started out, I was starting out as a, you know, solopreneur. And I said, I don't understand why anyone would do this. This is so much work. It's so frustrating. Yes, we have some AI tools, but it's a lot of work, which is the reason why, you know, when I wanted to get involved, I started getting involved with angel investment firms or companies where you have, you know, 10 investors, and each one looks at one aspect. So one is looking at founder, others looking at business, the other one's looking at legal, and the other one is looking at let's say you know, the team. So in this way, I'm hyper focused on. Now, one would say normally, if you're an angel investor, yes, most physicians tend to focus on, you know, the clinical aspect or the healthcare aspect. But I would say if you want to develop your expertise as an angel investor, it's important to have the other skill set, looking at the finance, looking at the team, looking at the founder, or being able to have conversations with, you know, lawyers on the legal aspect, so that at the end of the day, you kind of have the macro picture. So due diligence is a massive portion of angel investment. You know, you could spend, you know, an entire session on it, but the main things to look at that we covered here would be the founder, the product market fit, the business due diligence, is it monetizable, and is there a kind of a plan in place, you know, begin with the end in mind. Do they have an idea of what the liquidity event is? Because at the end of the day, as investors, we are interested in you know, bringing returns while still making the world better. Because otherwise, what's the difference between basic research and applied research, right? Applied research actually makes a difference. So as basic research is just building information for what we know. So, you know, let us say now, you know, as a physician, you know, I'm working long hours, but I see the inefficiencies, the frustrations of being in a public healthcare system, and I want to the phrase I use is live vicariously through the entrepreneur, that, you know, they're trying to make the world better and I'm just trying to keep it from collapsing. And a physician wants to get involved. So what options do they have? Now, obviously the easier one to understand is, you know, is writing the check. But what other options they have as well as of being involved in the angel ecosystem?
Right. No, great question. And, you know, that's actually a big reason why we started Halohealth, is we wanted to become the destination for these curious physicians. We don't expect our members to come in with an MD MBA and knowing everything. That's not our job. Our job is to help physicians to become sophisticated angel investor advisors. and do it so in a fun environment with respected colleagues who are also physicians going through the various stage of their advancement in the arena of angel investing. So what I recommend is definitely join the community. There's a lot of angel groups out there dedicated for this purpose, where you can learn from others and see deals. You know, there's a great book by Brad Feld called Venture Deals. And I think I recommend it to you as well, Drew. And if you get through that cover to cover, you'll speak the lingo 100%. You will go into a meeting and you will be, you know, at least 25, 50% there to talk business.
You're the founder of Flickr, I think right?
It's one of the big name VC guys. Brad Feld mostly does investing now on buy side rather than being a founder, but very knowledgeable book that if you get through and know it by heart, you'll be up to a great start. And in fact, that's why we actually gave, that was one of the 4 books we gifted to all of our members last year to help them on their journey. And then next would be join angel groups. The angel groups, what they do is they bring the deal flow to our members. So there's other ones out there. We're just one of them. It just happens to be that we are physician exclusive and we only do healthcare. But purpose of an angel group is so that you can meet like-minded folks who are there for one reason, which is to become an angel investor and see deals. And I was quoting that book because in the book it says you should see at least 100 deals. It's like cases, right? Folks go through med school, they get their advanced training, but they get so much better the more patients see, and they get more comfortable as they go through the cases, and it becomes almost like second nature. Same thing with anything in life. You have to see them. You can understand all the basic fundamentals, the lingo, which is actually not that hard. I think it's quite odd that society makes VC this mystical realm.
Yeah.
You know, all physicians are very smart, and I think everyone's pretty academic, but it's the application. So you got to see the deals. You got to see it, you got to understand it, and you got to get exposure because the market's moving fast. The trends are moving fast, right? Like, for example, for me, when we see a lot of remote diagnostic, we know, and we're you know, staying away from it for now because we saw hundreds of deals. And we know that based on the feedback, you know, continuous glucose monitoring comes into mind, where you can embed it. I think it's already out in the market and it gives you continuous reading. Well, clinically, what does that mean? Like, a lot of endocrinologists and even GPs can maintain and handle diabetic patients quite effectively and efficiently within our current system. The added values, data is great, but what does that convert to? Not something that's clinically actionable. And then also 2 weeks ago, I think Apple announced that they now have pretty close to closing in on a technology that your Apple Watch can give an active live glucose reading non-invasively, which will render these remote diagnostic startups, unfortunately, rendered useless. It could wipe out the whole vertical, right? So, you know, I'm going off on a little bit of tangent here, but what I'm saying is that by joining angel groups, you get to see the startups and get an advance warning on the market trends. And especially for physicians, I would highly urge you to give us a call. You know, there's a reason why we are physician dedicated. It's built by physicians for physicians. We try to make our educational material, our experiences, our meetings, our investment events applicable to physicians only and make it easier for them. And I think the best part is that you are amongst community of physicians who are perhaps a little bit different minded than everyone that you see at work. People who actually are here because they love angel investing, they want to learn about it, they have an entrepreneurial spirit. So we welcome any and all physicians. And, you know, even with that, we provide benefits. You know, we do operate under a membership model because we're not-for-profit, but we're partnered with various other organizations and education material where we waive the fee, $500, $900 participation fee for a course. Halohealth covers that. We also offer things that are helpful to your investor advisor journey. As an angel investor, it's nice to know the terms and be a good investor. But the part 2 of our model is that our folks are active investors. And that's what differentiates an angel investor compared to a passive investor who you give your money to someone and say, hey, give me good returns, but I'm too busy. Totally fine. What we're looking for and our secret sauce and what's been working is, for example, on a women's health company, 10 OB-GYN staff physicians invested. That startup is going to have so much of a competitive advantage than any other women's healthcare startup that perhaps don't have OB-GYN and on their capitalization table as investors. Because our folks give advisory, they help sometimes who are passionate, they step up and help with clinical trials. And even having 10 senior staff OB-GYNs talk about a product, that's huge advertisement that any other stuff. That's our secret sauce. And we also help our physician members get to that point, to become confident to be a healthcare advisor. And some of the way that we do that is compensated advisory opportunities. For example, we have a partnership with National Research Council, Alberta Innovates Innovation Factory in Hamilton, where we compensate our new physicians and train them to become sophisticated angel investors in real healthcare startup advisory cases at $400 an hour, up to 4 hours. You know, it's another allocation of your time, but through that, you'll learn how to become a sophisticated advisor. You'll build your brand as a healthcare early stage MD advisor. And that skill set can be also used to advise, hopefully, the startups that you invest in as well. So we take a all-in-one approach for any physician that is interested in entrepreneurial investing, advising, or anything that has to do with startup world within the realm of healthcare. We try to make it worthwhile for our folks. And that's exactly why we're proud to say we welcome any and all physicians who might be interested in this space. And I'm happy to get in contact with any of your contacts or anyone watching this video. You know, our website is halohealth.ca, just like our logo, and very easy to get in contact with me or any of my fine team members.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, thanks a lot for mentioning the various ways that physicians can get involved, right? So the most common way that physicians think that they can get involved is capital, but there's way more than just capital investment. And even when I started this journey at the $25,000 check, now with the use of special purpose vehicles, while still trying to build your expertise in angel investments, the check size has gone down to even like 5,000, right? In addition to that, as you mentioned, Halohealth covered the education portion, or that series of videos and sessions, while you're building the expertise to look through, deal flow through various connections that Halohealth has with the various angel networks, and in different provinces too, like both Alberta and BC, some of which that I had taken. And, it has removed this idea when I started that, unless you have a net worth of, $1 million or more, and your portfolio should be no more than, 1-2% in angel investments, don't even bother. But there's so many steps you can take in the meanwhile until you get to that stage. Now, as a physician, yes, we're high income earners. We may get to that and then allocate a set of our portfolio, but the skill set is one of the most intensive that one needs to learn. Like, I can take someone from the street and explain to them real estate, loan to value ratios, and maybe even the S&P 500, but to explain to them valuations, the Y Combinator safes, we didn't cover any of those aspects. We don't need to, because the purpose of this is a primer to angel investments, not so much, how do we structure the deal as a safe or as convertible debt or anything, any of these terms, which we don't need to know. But there's so much to learn despite rather than just, investing our capital. And even we can get our capital down with being using special purpose vehicles or being lead angel investors, and so on. And you also brought up some good literature too. So venture deals, like, again, when I started this journey, 0 to 1, Peter Thiel, venture deals, disciplined entrepreneurship. Jason Calacanis, he had a podcast, how he turned 100,000 into 100 million or something is the book.
Yeah, it's actually those two other books that we sent to our members.
Yeah,
that you just mentioned. They're required reading for sure.
Yeah, I would say Jason Calacanis is a little bit more blunt in his literature, but still, like, I spent some time just reading these books and writing down all the terms, going through Y Combinator.
Right.
Actually, Mars, I took the entrepreneur courses through Mars, which at that time they had it at a very nominal fee
Right.
in order to
It's a good
access it.
resource as well.
There's a couple obviously US sites as well. Small Business, I think it's called Small Business. The Small
Yeah.
Business. Um,
And one thing I forgot to mention is a big part of our membership perks is our investment event, which occurs at
yeah.
least 5 times a year, so every other month, where we present, like Dragon's Den for all of our members,
Yes.
less than top 5% of all the deals that we see, pre-vetted. We want to set our members up for success. So we're bringing the best deals that we pre-vetted, and they come and pitch, and our members participate in that live. And as part of that reading, we bring in industry experts. So for example, we are very close with all the venture capital firms that do healthcare in Canada. So we had the rare treat to have the principal of Lumira Ventures, which one of our staff now works at, and we talk, as well as the big names like IGAN, Amplitude. And then we have those unique folks like, I like to give recognition to co-founder of Inkblot, where he's a physician himself, and he came and taught us his view as a founder who exited, but also as an angel investor. So we also incorporate that educational element that is very rare from folks that are very highly regarded, but hard to get people's time, because we want to give access to our folks. So that's, I would say, another great resource if you do decide to join us, that will take you from hopefully 0 to a million
Yeah.
quicker, because it'll help
Yeah.
you learn quicker than any other resource out there for physicians. So I just wanted to mention that because I forgot that as part of our secret sauce as well.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, that was part of the inspiration, because again, when I started this journey, actually just before, it was around the time that Halohealth started, I contacted NACO, which was the National Angel
Capital Organization.
And I contacted NACO and I said, I like what is being done here, but I want to do it better. I want to learn to be a better angel investor. And that's when like some literature was coming out around that time. And actually, I don't know if it's Halohealth or some of the videos. So Ray Musica and
Yes,
Inkblot's
he was one of
founder
our speakers.
Were interviewed.
That's right.
I remember listening at those interviews and then meeting them again. And that's when one gets confidence in like, okay, there is something here more than just, angel investments, like, whatever rep that angel investments get, unfortunately, due to the media, with certain companies like Theranos, or which we won't get into now. Focus on the positives for now. Now, so on some closing remarks, then is you talked about how physicians can contact Halohealth, how they can build their expertise, how they can get involved in the angel ecosystem. Is there anything else you wanted to add for our listeners?
Yeah, I think in the scope of angel investing, the question that I get asked quite often when I'm in these speaking engagements or as a panelist is, how is the landscape of angel investing, especially during the turmoil of our financial situation?
Yeah.
And here is the answer that I give based on anecdotal evidence, as well as ecosystem chats among various general partners or principals at other firms. Yes, the valuations are down. Yes, we might be going through depression. However, although late stage deals might be slower because of that fact, because they're closer to IPOing, closer to the capital market, so we're talking about Series A, B, C, angel investing is very early. And because all the valuations are now getting settled, it might be a good chance to buy in, because you're going to get it at a lower buy-in.
Great acquisition time.
Yeah, and the second benefit to that is the market tends to adjust itself and become efficient again. And angel investments take longer time to mature, to get to an acquisition IPO or whatever. And our hope is that within that 2 to 3 years where you invested lower, the market would have recovered, so then the valuation will go up. And the market will be efficient, that the companies will exit There's companies have an appetite to buy these startups. And by the time they hopefully get to IPO, the market would have recovered where they get a fair valuation, not at an all-time low like right now. So that's why I think those are two reasons why, not putting money towards work is the worst thing you can do as an investor. Having it sit under your mattress or wherever you place it, not putting your money to work, right? So, I think there's a case for investing in angel type investment now, especially when the risk for commodities and assets that were supposed to be risk averse is quite uncertain because of the macroeconomic trend. So given those three reasons, I would say, if you want to invest, why not invest in something that you understand and that you're passionate about, and that you could be a part of changing something in this world, and also get a handsome return, hopefully.
Yeah.
So hopefully. I think, hopefully. So I think that's very unique for angel investing, even though we were in a quite an economic depression.
Yeah.
So I want to leave that sentiment.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to get into the realm of, financial advice, like economic advice. The bottom line is that, as someone who does a lot of research in asset classes, aside from angel investment, everything has cycles. And the famous investor Ray Dalio said, every asset class has their reckoning under the sun, but every asset class has made riches for human beings. So it doesn't matter if it's real estate, if it's S&P 500, if it's angel investments or whatever, right? Well, so what has changed in between them is the humans are the same, but the asset classes have changed. It's because of these cycles that exist. So this goes back to your original investment thesis, right? If your goal is to make this world better, but you're too busy taking care of patients because you're a physician, which is fine, but your investment thesis, I want to make this world better at the same time. And because I can't be in two places at the same time, this is where this ecosystem does the work for you while you're asleep, right? And but you do have to fuel it from time to time. And it's not necessarily always capital. It could be just your advice, connections, expertise, whatever it may be. So, yes, it's important to look at the markets, but sometimes it's you just go with your investment thesis, your vision, your philosophy in life, and say, I'm going to try to make this world better no matter, what's happening in the world. I mean, if you want to take the other side, when there's blood on the streets, buy property, right? So
right. And I mean, to add to that, just on a very elementary level, which is, if something is solving a problem and they're doing a great job and that product is superior, we live in a capitalistic world where if it is needed and it does a good job, people will buy it.
Yeah.
And if people buy it, then the company is going to generate revenue. And if they generate revenue, you as an investor is probably going to make a return. Yeah. So it can be as simple as that. But we like it when our physicians invest in a product they believe in, because they know it will benefit their patient and themselves. And they know that it's going to better the world and people are going to buy it because we're not communists. We live in a capitalistic environment.
Yeah, exactly.
And because of that, we get both. It helps people, but also because it is needed, there is actual value. There's monetary value on the product. And because people purchase, the company is going to generate revenue, and there's your returns.
And the other thing is also, again, we can talk about philosophically on this, is that, when you get to higher level stages, the amount of revenue you can squeeze or extract from the market tends to reduce over time. While as an angel investment, a startup, essentially the revenue is the sky because we're going to get there, right? So if you belong to that philosophy, that's another one to look at. But yes, exactly. We do not want to negate the importance of due diligence and the importance that this is a high risk, illiquid investment for high reward. But that's just how the capitalistic, markets in the world and one's philosophy works. So
I would agree. High risk, high reward, and sometimes the hold can be long, but also that's why you need to diversify your portfolio.
Yeah. Okay, and on that note, I want to thank the listeners for taking their time to listen to this section or segment on primer into angel investments. We covered aspects of what is an angel investment, why Halohealth focuses on healthcare verticals and the sub verticals within them, how physicians can add value to the angel ecosystem despite having a less knowledge on financial literacy. But we also covered on how one could build their financial literacy in the angel investment ecosystem, which is probably one of the most intensive ones from my own experience. And we also talked about how you don't necessarily have to be a billionaire to, do angel investments. You can do capital. Wealth comes in various forms. It could be time, talents, and financial wealth as well. We covered the importance of due diligence, and we also covered the importance of how a network is building in Canada. As I said, when I started this journey, I was talking to physicians in the US because I couldn't find someone to talk to, someone who was already in the shoes of doing angel investments. I'm glad that Halohealth, is here now and has actually exponentially grown from the time that I talked to you when I was moving to a small community in Ontario.